Hello there. We are back with another Pirkei Avot text explication. We are in the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, and we are now on to the 14th text in Pirkei. I take that back, the 15th text in the second chapter of Pirkei Avot. After spending the last 5 plus, probably 7 or so, texts dealing with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and his students sharing some really interesting insights, we now transition to the next couple of statements, really closing out this second chapter with a couple of statements from Rabbi Tarfon. Now, Rabbi Tarfon is not one of these 5 students. He may even be slightly younger than them. What seems to be the reason of the placing of these 2 statements of Rabbi Tarfon's here, it seems to me, has to do with the previous text. Now, the previous text we saw from, or we heard about from Rabbi Elazar ben Arach mentioned so each of the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai each shared 3 things. Now, the third thing of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is that you should know before whom you toil, and you should trust that the person who's in charge of the workers will pay you back a proper reward for your efforts. Now, both of the next ones, both this and the next 2 texts, the next 2 statements from Rabbi Tarfon, both involve work, they involve labor, and they also involve payment, as we're going to see in this one. Rabbi Tarfon says, Rabbi Tarfon says, and he breaks with the tripartite statement style, as I mentioned, that predominated the first chapter, where it had a lot of tripartite wisdom statements from the sages mentioned, and even as we have just seen, the last 5 statements from the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai all had 3 things. This does not. This has 1, 2, 3, 4. It has 5 things, okay? 5 aspects. Here we go. Rabbi Tarfon says, the day is short. The work is plentiful. The laborers are lazy. The reward is great, and the master of the house is insistent. Okay. Now, clearly, Rabbi Tarfon is endeavoring in metaphor. This is not, I don't believe this is not meant to be taken literally. Okay. The day is short, and yet the work is plentiful. There's a lot of work to get done in a short amount of time. The laborers are lazy, but the reward is great, or the payment is great. And it seems like the master of the work is insistent, right? He's pressuring the workers. He really wants to get this done. What is going on here? Not fully clear. Clearly, it sounds like life. It sounds like life. There's work to get done, not so much time to do it, but there's money involved, right? There's payment involved, and there's pressure, definitely top-down pressure being done. Not 100% sure, but I do want to share something I found that is deeply fascinating. The terseness of this and the metaphor is really curious. Really fascinatingly, there is a parallel with Greek literature. There's a statement from Hippocrates. Now, Hippocrates lived centuries before, right? We're talking about Rabbi Tarfon, who lives really the turn of the 2nd century. We're talking tail end of the 1st century and into the beginning of the 2nd century. Hippocrates, on the other hand, lived from 460 BCE to 370 BCE. So several centuries prior to Rabbi Tarfon. And here's what he wrote in his book, Aphorisms. Life is short, the art long, opportunity fleeting, experiment treacherous, and judgment difficult. Very similarly stylistically, and also 5 things. And life is short, sounds like the day is short. The art long, what one is trying to accomplish. Opportunity fleeting, that's a little bit different. Experiment treacherous, again, a little bit different. Judgment difficult. Clear similarities, stark dissimilarities, of course, but also just as Hippocrates is working off of 5 quick things to talk about with a terse descriptor, so too does Rabbi Tarfon engage in it. Now, to connect these two, I found this excerpt from a really fascinating book. This book is called Wisdom, Politics, and Historiography. It's a really interesting book written over a decade and a half ago by Professor Amram Tropper. And here's what he writes. Whether or not one believes that these two sayings are sufficiently similar to warrant the conclusion that Rabbi Tarfon adapted a popular Greek aphorism, the differences between them illustrate the contrast between the worldview of a Greek doctor and that of a rabbi. Whereas Hippocrates bemoans the difficulty of acquiring medical knowledge during the course of one's short lifetime, Rabbi Tarfon stresses the temporal limitations placed on the aspiring religious person. Really interesting. These two statements, fairly similar in style, yet quite different in content. They're also a half millennium apart. Rabbi Tarfon comes centuries later. Really fascinating that he, now again, whether or not one, just to rewind Professor Tropper, what he said is whether or not one believes enough that they're similar enough to warrant the conclusion that Rabbi Tarfon adapted a popular Greek aphorism, although it's really hard not to see him to be working off of that. But there are clear differences. So definitely we have a lot, in Rabbi Tarfon's view here, there's a lot to get done for, as Professor Tropper puts it, an aspiring religious person. Interesting, because as we've seen throughout both the first and the second chapter here of Pirkei Avot, a lot of attention has been dedicated towards the study of Torah. That's been a real big focus. And even though Rabbi Tarfon did not specify Torah or Torah study, it seems that at least could be what he's referring to as part of this metaphor. Very possible. So, really interesting statement here from Rabbi Tarfon. We're going to get to see one more text from him before we close out this chapter in the next text, and I'm very excited as we get to it. In the meantime, actually, you know what? I just want to quickly say, sometimes it feels really interesting as opposed to, I think what Rabbi Tarfon really is trying to point out here is as opposed to saying, life happens, life goes on, but actually he's saying, we only have a short amount of time to really accomplish a lot. Rather than just simply kick up our feet, be lazy, maybe there's something to work on here. Interesting perspective indeed. All right, that's what I've got for now. Thank you so much for watching.